Today's episode was recorded in San Diego, California on February 16, 2024 at the Scripps Oceanographic Institute. Please be sure to check out our other episodes, including one with Modest Mouse and Paul Stamets on the topic of mushroom science. Don't forget to click subscribe, and please rate the show on your favorite podcast platform.
This is Sing for Science Labs. I'm your host, Matt White. Each episode in this series brings together artists and scientists to explore one topic of shared interest. Today's topic is perspectives on plastic through the lens of circularity. Our guests are global superstar DJ Blondish and Scripps marine biologist Kara Wiggin. The artist behind Blondish is music producer and environmental activist Viviane Bacos. The undercurrent moving through all of Viv's work is a commitment to contributing positivity to the music industry, both on and off the stage. Her nonprofit, Bye Bye Plastic, is aimed at eradicating single-use plastics across all aspects of the music business, from artist dressing rooms to vinyl LP manufacturing. Kara Wiggin is a researcher at the Scripps
Scripps Oceanographic.
Kara Wiggin is a researcher at the Scripps Oceanographic Institute, where she studies plastic pollution on a microscopic level. The work Kara's lab does at Scripps falls under the umbrella of ecotoxicology, a field that integrates ecology, toxicology, physiology, and chemistry for the purposes of understanding how microplastics in the ocean interact with human diseases. Hello, Viv and Kara. Thank you for coming on Sing for Science.
On a Sunday.
Yeah.
Let's
no
go.
less.
Thank you for having me.
So I think maybe the best way to start, because I think to me it seems so central to your philosophy as both artist and activist, is to ask you to talk about the concept of circularity and what it means to you.
Yeah, sure. So I don't even consider myself an activist, really. It's all about just, I think, as a human, we all kind of seek balance in everything we do. And I love seeking balance in everything. And so I see when there's inefficiencies in a system around me, and in the music industry, it's an event full of plastic. And I just saw something, I could do something about it. So I'm just helping, festivals come back into balance to be plastic free, more sustainable. So in terms of the question you're asking, what was the question?
About circularity, what it means to you, how do you experience it? I mean, on and off the stage.
Yeah, sure. So circularity is a form of balance, right? And I mean, everything is energy. And I didn't always know that. I grew up in a system, I feel like we all did, where, in the 90s, where everyone was like, when you ask them, do you believe in energy? A lot of people would say, I don't believe in energy. And I'm like, and now when I think about that, like, how could anyone think that they didn't believe in energy when everything in this universe is energy? That's the constant of this universe, just like changes. So when I realized that I had that eureka moment with energy, I'm like, oh, actually, this is my why. You know what I mean? This is my why. Everything to do with energy. If I approach
This is my why I'm here.
Yeah, like to bring this concept to the world is like I started approaching every single decision I make, everything I do with my music around energy.
Okay.
Right? So it's like in relationships, let's say. A simple example, like isn't that friend or that family member or whoever taking my energy, or is it giving me energy? So I do this kind of like scan every few months. And I go through my friends list and everyone I'm talking to, people I work with, and ask the question, are you giving me energy or taking my energy? And then I can make decisions based on that.
So outside of relationships, how else do you experience that?
With decisions. You can make decisions with...
So business.
Anything.
Yeah.
Personal, self-care, whatever. I mean, there's infinite examples.
What about...
What's an example for you?
For energy.
Yeah. I mean, kind of my everyday, how I work, how I plan my days. There's a lot that goes into being a scientist every day, and so much thought that I have to really balance my energy with, my intense thinking periods versus getting other work done. It's all very energy balanced in terms of the work that I do.
And that's what
So.
circularity is, balance. We're always trying to get back to that. So like, after we're done this interview, do I want to go in the ocean and take a dip, or am I going to go to a loud bar and kill time before the flight?
My guess is the former. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go in the ocean, cold plunge.
So I'm a big proponent of the cold plunge, but I learned I can't do it in the winter. There's something about my dosha where my body does not want the cold.
Oh, wow. Dosha is all about going, you're back to balance, right? With how you eat, how you approach food, the speed at which you eat at.
So can you explain in a little bit more detail how circularity represents balance?
It's homeostasis.
Yeah.
I mean, you're asking, and the scientist is here. You should be asking her.
Well, everyone's perspective counts equally here.
Okay. So if just in the form of plastic, I guess, if you want to, plastic doesn't break down. Other materials, let's say waste, feces, it breaks down, right? It breaks down into a soil. The soil is used by plants or trees to grow, fertilize, help them grow. And then that tree grows, but the tree doesn't have feces, so we need another example. But you know what I mean? There is a circularity there, and that's when a system is in balance because it's working perfectly without human intervention.
Yeah. Okay, before we start talking about plastics, this is the first time I've had a DJ on the show, and it's
Right.
to me, that is such a fascinating dynamic of a single person in the booth, in front of thousands of people. And there's what to me is a very obvious exchange of what could be described as energy among other things.
Totally.
So what's that? I mean, to put it very blandly, what is that like?
I mean, what is a DJ's goal, I guess? When you ask, it's funny because I just happened to be on Instagram the other day and John Summit was doing an interview and he was like, everyone's like, what are your goals? I just want to become bigger and better, And then I was like, what does that mean? Why do us DJs just want to always become bigger? For what? To make more money, to have more people in front of us? Like, why do DJs want to become bigger? And at some point in my career, I also thought that, DJs, we want to become bigger and better, but we love that one vibe on the dance floor. When you're playing that song, it doesn't matter what knob you turn or whatever, everyone is on that same vibe. Doesn't matter what you do. I think that's what we strive for because that's complete presence, right? Which is balance at the end of the day as well.
So is there a moment during a performance when you feel that and you know it and you can recognize it visually, but also...
It's a feeling.
Yeah.
It's energy.
Yeah.
It's really energy.
Is there
in its finest form.
Yeah.
Because there's potentially 200 people in front of you or 10,000 people in front of you, but just that knowing, that feeling that doesn't matter where people are at in their mindset or what's going on in their life, and they're all on the same vibe. That's an amazing achievement. So everything that you've worked towards as a DJ with your music up until that point, makes you be grateful.
Yeah.
And what I was trying to get at before with the bigger and better is we DJs, I feel like that's the superficial thing that we as DJs think about when we first start becoming DJs. That's the top of it. But when you actually start going deeper, when I started going India and stuff, meditating, breathing, all that kind of stuff, and I found out my why, it's I'm not a DJ. I am a DJ. Music is my conduit for a bigger purpose. And that's bringing connection to this world. And I just want people to live their best life. And my music helps me talk to anyone without actually using my voice.
Sure. But what you're describing to me isn't exclusive for me to DJs. It just seems very human. So I would what is the equivalent in the world of science and academia of more, getting more, becoming bigger? I mean, what's the equivalent like?
Yeah, I mean, it's just publish or perish is kind of the academia concept. You just more and more papers, you're trying to get more and more research out there. And, eventually just sort of reach this status where most or everything you do is very respected. But there's very much like a more and more.
And why? But why do you need that respect? I think you hit a wall because that's without the purpose, But then when you hit that wall, or you're getting closer to, you start, when you're on the journey, asking yourself the why. Okay, why do I want to be here? And then you break through that when you figure out your purpose.
Mm-hmm. Are there examples in your world of, like, you feel like people have had a similar revelation, or like are there more than one? Is there more than one path in your world?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think within academia specifically, people can get into it for a number of reasons. And a lot of the people in my field of marine biology get into it just because they're so passionate about the environment and the ocean and, saving it and protecting it. But there are a lot of people that just get into science because it's something that, is straightforward. They can see a path forward through a career, through getting a PhD, becoming a professor, yada, yada, getting to teach, getting to publish. And, people just do that because they are good at it and they want to continue. So there's, a number of ways you can get into it. And some people who want more and more, maybe the people who want the most and are pushing the most can either come from a way where they're saying the more work I do and the better I am at it, the bigger difference I can make. But I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who just do it for the fame within the scientific community, or, you can get a lot of money at that point. So there's always motivations for it too.
So this brings us to a good spot as you start talking about the why, and I would like to understand a little bit more specifically about how you both arrived at the idea of addressing plastic pollution. And there's a really interesting origin story, right? It's after a festival that you performed. You're on a beach.
You know it?
That's all I know.
I was playing one of the most iconic clubs in the world. It's in Brazil. It's called Warung, and it's like this beautiful club, but kind of in the lush jungle on a cliff in Brazil. And Brazil's very lush.
And it's outdoors, the club?
It's in this like tunnel corridor, but then at the end, when the sun comes up and you're still playing, you see the palm trees and everything and a beautiful sunrise. So I was playing there, and the beautiful sunrise was coming. There's 3,000 people in front of me. And then I see their silhouettes, and then the party ends around 6 a.m. And you just see this like mountain of plastic water bottles in the middle of the dance floor, in between my view of the lush jungle sunrise. And that difference gave me my eureka moment. I was like, and there was like these like robot cleaning ladies, like cleaning crew. Ladies, I shouldn't say that.
Wait, were they people behaving robotically or actually robots?
Everything was, no, there weren't robots. It's so savage. We didn't have robots back then. It was 7 years ago. They were like, but they were just silhouettes to me, like sweeping more plastic water bottles into this bigger mountain. I was like, you know what? Like, I can call everyone in the music industry is one phone call away. I can do something about this. So that's how it really started. But like, don't get me wrong, just trying to remove single-use plastics, and that's like water bottles and cups, it's a huge, huge, huge undertaking.
I'd bet.
Because systems are so set in their ways, and, I'm up against, the fossil fuel industry, which is the richest industry in the world. But it's fun.
Yeah. And so that's the primary mission, right? Is to eliminate single-use plastics.
Yeah, we're starting with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we have these side dreams like plastic-free vinyl.
And so, so your latest record that just came out was manufactured entirely using, what is it, like a material that biodegrades, or?
It's made out of used cooking oil.
Okay.
But I don't think it's 100%, because there's still R&D. You're almost at you have.
It's like 0.1%.
Is it? You know more better than I do, because
I saw 99 point something.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. What'd you say?
So I also saw that it was like almost 100.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great though.
Oh yeah.
But in general, I have questions for you. But that whole thing just, that dream started with trolls. Like, in the comments, like people love to be super like mean and like call you out. And like we're by plastic, we're doing something. We're not doing it perfectly, but and it's not about being perfect. It's about doing something, because to change behavior, you need to show up. You know, so one of the comments on some posts we did was like, but they're talking about, we're just talking about removing single-use plastics at festivals. And you're like, well, what are you going to do with CDJs? You got to get rid of that. And you got to get rid of vinyl. I'm like, no, bro, single-use plastics. But you just but what if we can do a plastic-free vinyl? That's crazy. That would be insane, So we started with my co-founder, we started researching, and we were working with this material PHA, which is a bacteria-based material. So we've been R&Ding that for the last 2 years with Evolution Music out of the UK. But we have to wait for our time in the vinyl pressing plant, because they have to flush out all the fossil fuel pellets and get rid of everything before we can go in, because then they're just mixed materials, So we only get a little bit, unless I buy my own vinyl pressing plant. We'd have to, which we can do, I guess. We have to wait our turn. So we don't have this material yet, the PHA.
Okay.
But my fans want some vinyl.
Yeah.
I need to stay within my ethos. So my team found a bio vinyl made out of used cooking oil. Okay. But the question I have for you is, Bye Plastic is all about not greenwashing, but it's so hard, because the more you go down the line, it's tough. It's hard to do all that research. So, does it still need industrial composting to break down if something's made out of used cooking oil, like a really high temperature? Or can you explain how that works? Am I greenwashing by putting out this vinyl? Am I, yeah.
Yeah, good questions. I don't know the chemistry of PHA off the top of my head.
It's not PHA, it's the used cooking oil.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'd have to understand more about how that's created, because just because something started as used cooking oil doesn't mean that it sort of ends in still a very degradable material. These things have to go through a lot of chemical reactions and processes to get it to be where it can function as a vinyl material. So it really depends on how it's created, whether or not it can be composted in a backyard or industrial. Hopefully it would be well industrial composted, but again, a lot of people don't have access to that, so I'm not sure this particular one whether it would be. That would be really cool, but obviously if it's kind of backyard compostable, it's probably not going to have the lifespan of something that's more industrial compostable. And I think the key with that would be to offer a program where you accept it back to submit it to industrial composting. That's the thing with composting, is that, you can have all these compostable materials if you go to Sweet Green or something and they say that their material is compostable, but then there's no composting, bins in the Sweet Green or composting anywhere.
Everywhere
yeah,
California.
Exactly. It says it's compostable, but then where are you supposed to put it?
And everyone uses compostable materials.
Exactly.
The waste management isn't thought about.
Yeah, and it's the infrastructure isn't there to capture all of that compostable material. So it's just going into a landfill where it will sit and not compost forever and ever. So yeah, one of the things that can help with any accusations of greenwashing is offer a way to, if it's only industrialized compost, send it back, and then you guys can send it, or have some sort of end of life conversation or end of life plan for the materials, which is kind of the key. For sure, absolutely, and that would be the dream. But then it's in 2 generations, there kind of needs to be a plan for these things.
For sure.
But having just the fact that you're giving that cooking oil a second use is by definition, you're recycling already. So seems like a strong defense against that, greenwashing accusations.
For sure. And it's a conversation starter to inspire or create that energy potential into changing human behavior.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
That is the hardest thing I've found to change. But then through sharing experience and possibilities like printing a vinyl on used cooking oil, it opens a conversation and it makes people think and give them inspiration and motivation to also take steps in their own life.
Absolutely. So what is your plastic origin story?
Mine was that basically I just always grew up an environmentalist. My dad is, taught us really well, turn off the lights, save water, everything that you can possibly do to kind of live a very environmental life. But then when I was in college, that's when you learn about food, and I became a vegetarian and all these things. But then at the end of college, I had stumbled across, I think, like a blog or something that was talking about the main thing that environmentalists are ignoring in terms of being an environmentalist in your actions every day is plastic. And this was like early 2013. So, environmentalism is still in our everyday conversations, but people hadn't really started talking about plastic pollution yet. That was sort of the very beginning of it. And I had been like, I'm walking around telling everyone I was an environmental science major. I was so devoted to the environment. I'm telling everyone I'm this environmentalist, yet I come home from CVS with a plastic bag and I'm using plastic utensils when I go out, and I'm using all of this plastic and I'm creating so much waste. And none of us thought about at all that that is an action that we can take to be more environmental, and that is also a part of environmentalism. And there was a few big blogs at the time that had just come out talking about how to go zero waste, which was a very new concept at the time. Now it's a concept that's super popular, and almost everyone you talk to will at least have heard of it or know what it means. And the concept is basically just going through your life and using no plastic waste or anything you can throw into landfill that's, wouldn't be broken down naturally. And so it was just this like light bulb where I was like, oh, I'm a self-proclaimed environmentalist who has a giant plastic bag full of other plastic bags in my cabinet. And so I started getting really passionate about zero waste. I went fully zero waste in my life, and I was talking about it to everyone and bothering everyone about it. And then when I was looking into a master's program for marine biology, I stumbled across some papers studying microplastics. And I think it was microplastics in whales. And I was like, people do this. And I'd been really looking for what field I wanted to go into. I had studied a number of things in undergrad, and I was kind of deciding which avenue I wanted to go in. And I was like, oh my God, plastic pollution. I didn't know you could study that in an academic environment. So I just emailed the professors I was interested in and asked them if that's what I could study. And my master's advisor said, sure, whatever you want. Sounds not like something I do, but I will support you. And so that's how I got into it. And so it's a nice thing because it's a personal and professional passion of mine. So it's a nice intersection of those two things.
Well, and like you were talking about balance, just being able to integrate to have this kind of one purpose that drives every aspect of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
What I also think, like earlier we're talking about how energy is everywhere, right? And it's so engraved in every single thing in our existence that people don't notice it. It's everywhere, so it's nowhere.
Yeah.
And then the same thing with plastic.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the same thing. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So people don't think it's a bad thing.
100%. That's such a good metaphor for that.
Yeah,
It's so true.
just realized that right now.
Yeah. I mean, genius, because it's so true. Plastic, it's so prevalent. I mean, most of the clothes we all probably have on right now are plastic. We're sitting on plastic, everything around us. So people just don't even notice it. They don't realize where it is.
We're sitting on plastic and the fibers are microplastics and we inhale those microplastics, then we become microplastic. We're just plastic.
And what did I hear you say? Like we end up with a credit card worth of plastic in us?
Yeah, there was a big study that came out that says you can eat a credit card's worth of plastic a week. That'll obviously depend on your diet and what you eat and what you interact with and everything. But yeah, you can end up with a lot of plastic in you, for sure.
So can I
ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So great. We all have microplastics in us. It's everywhere. How do we get it out?
Of our bodies?
Yeah.
Time.
But time like before the end of our life?
Yeah. Probably. At some point, I mean, it'll work its way through your blood. It'll go into your, you can like secrete it out in many ways.
Is there anything I can ingest, any kind of material, any kind of some substance that can, take it off the tissues or wherever it's hanging out?
No.
Let's come up with it.
No, not that we know of.
Let's come up with it.
You just kind of have to wait. Yeah, your body does a really good job of filtering out things on its own. So you just kind of have to let it let it do its job.
But didn't you, because you said like I saw you on some TV interview saying that we can metabolize plastic.
Yeah, we can't metabolize pieces of plastic very easily or quickly, but what we can metabolize is the plastic additive. So a lot of times plastic is created with a lot of chemicals that they add to it to give plastics its different properties like flexibility, bendability, and things. And those our bodies have the ability to metabolize, depending on what it is. Some of the chemicals it's slower, and some of them are faster. But we can metabolize some of those additives.
Can you give us because I just don't know, like, what are plastics? What are they made out of? How do you make them?
Yeah, for sure. So plastics, like you had mentioned, are made from crude oil. They can also be made from natural gas, but for the purposes of this, we'll go with crude oil because that's where most of it's made from. So crude oil is obviously underground from previously alive things that has now just broken down so far into crude oil. So what crude oil is a bunch of different hydrocarbons, which are basically just molecules that only have carbon and hydrogen in them. And it's a soup of a lot of different hydrocarbons. When we pump that out of the ground to do many, many things with crude oil, we can actually separate it into those different classes of hydrocarbons, so into the different groups of those molecules. And those different groups of molecules can make different types of polymers. So for instance, one of them is propane. So you can use that in your grills and everything, but you can take propane, you can break down that molecule into its kind of most simple component, and then you can multiply that, which is called polymerization. It's just like adding each one of those molecules next to each other to make a long polymer, and then that turns into polypropylene. So it's propane, and then when you break it down into its most base structure, that's propylene, and then when you add a bunch of them together, that's polypropylene. And that's what most of our like food products, that's sort of supposed to be like the food safe plastic is made out of.
But you do air quotes because you don't buy it.
I don't know where we got that from.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe.
Yeah.
Probably not. I feel like we just kind of say that. But then there's also, ethane, which is sort of like a gas that can make ethylene, which then makes polyethylene, which is like our water bottles and things. So these hydrocarbons from the crude oil make different types of plastics.
Polythene Pam, Beatles song.
Yeah. And so that's how we make plastics, is straight up from crude oil. So one of the things that I always like to point out to people when we talk about plastics is that it's not this separate issue. It's really so tied to climate change. It's tied to the use of crude oil and our oil and gas industry in the country and abroad. And, it's really tied to these sort of basic climate energy, conversations that we have in our country. So that's what plastic is as its base. When you make raw polyethylene or polypropylene, it's sort of like a resin, which is sort of like a kind of slimy substance. And then from there, we extrude that. We can make it into these little nurdles, which are basically just pellets of raw plastic.
Like for vinyl.
Exactly. And then that's then shipped out to companies who will then melt it down and make it into all the products. So that's what plastic is at its core. Yeah, it's a great word, one of my favorites. And it's just the term for a pre-production pellet of plastic.
We're all nerds, but I haven't heard of nurdles.
Yeah.
I mean, it just made me think of the nerd candy.
Yeah.
Does it look like that, kind of?
No, they're kind of like tiny cylinders.
They're more structured.
Yeah.
Nerds are not structured pieces of sugar.
Yeah, they're just like
Colored pieces of sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So then, because I started this conversation by asking Viv for her understanding of circularity, because from my perspective, the through line between both of what you both do is this, because you introduced this idea of circularity as it pertains to our relationship with plastic and the ocean. So can you talk a little bit about that, how you see that?
Yeah, so one of the concepts in plastic pollution that is getting a lot of attention, and as it should, is how we manage plastic. So like you said, we just use a lot of it. It gets swept up. Where does it go? It's produced forever, yada, yada. So there's this concept called the circular economy. And the circular economy is something that we don't use now, but it's sort of like you said with the trees. Like the idea is that you have the raw material of the plastic, then you make the plastic, you distribute it, you use it, and then you recycle it into new raw material that then goes through the cycle again. So it's just sort of infinitely in a circle of use and reuse. And that is sort of the ideal scenario environmentally for products to go through. And it's, how it used to work 200 years ago when things were just from nature and we weren't producing so many artificial things. But it's a concept that we don't currently practice right now with plastic pollution. And so the opposite of the circular economy, which is our current reality, is that we use these raw materials, which is crude oil that we've taken out of the ground. So it's not something reused like vegetable oil or cooking oil. We create the plastic, distribute it, use it, and then dispose of it. And one of the places it's disposed is often in the ocean. And it's usually not intentional. It's what we call mismanaged waste. And that's, a resting point for a lot of the plastic that we produce. So, or else it's in a landfill. But landfills can spill and other things can happen there. So sort of the concept of circularity with plastics in the ocean is that it's not a circle and that it should be, but really it's kind of a straight line from using into the environment. And then it just ends up causing harm over and over as that line just continues.
But you study something so specific that does actually have a circle in terms of, human-related diseases that with plastics and then that does come back our way.
Yeah, so my research in particular is studying the interaction of microplastics or just regular plastic pollution in the ocean with diseases. So in the ocean, if you are studying sewage or something that goes into the ocean, there's going to be a lot of diseases in there, like fecal bacteria that can make you sick. But we also have diseases in the ocean that are endemic to the marine environment, which means they're from the marine environment, they live there, but they just also happen to infect humans. And one of those is a bacteria called Vibrio, which is also causes things like cholera. But I'm studying a less intense version of it. And what's interesting about Vibrio is that they're kind of a particle-loving bacteria. They want to be attached to something. So what we're finding is that when we sample microplastics or any plastics from the marine environment, they have this genus of bacteria called Vibrio on their surface. And we're finding this a lot.
Plastics and Vibrio hang out?
Yeah. So basically, they'll grow this biofilm of bacteria on the surface of the plastic. And since plastic is so resistant to degradation and breakdown, those plastics can be transported all over the ocean very quickly, but also very effectively without being, sunk to the sea floor very easily, or, things like wood or seaweed or other natural items in the ocean, they'll be broken down. So they're not going to make it as far. So plastic can be transported long distances and can potentially move those diseases to more pristine areas where you wouldn't see them normally. So what I'm studying is, the attachment of these bacteria onto plastic. And then what you're finding is that then organisms in the ocean will eat these plastics that have these bacteria. If humans are eating those, like for instance, oysters, which is what I'm studying, humans eat oysters raw. So we're not killing that disease. And then we'll get that disease. And then, it's all a big circle because then, when we defecate in other forms of our waste, then that can go back into the ocean, things like that. But really, it's just kind of a circle from humans are producing the microplastics or the plastic. It's ending up in the environment. It's getting, it's having this disease growing on the surface of it. Then it's kind of coming back to us in a new way. So it's that level of circularity as well.
Like what? It's like a food poisoning kind of?
Yes. So the one I study is called Vibrio perihemolyticus, which is an insane name, but really it just causes food poisoning. It's like gastritis. And
must be Mexican. Everyone, when they go to Mexico, gets food poisoning all the time.
Yeah.
The water.
It's very worldwide at this point. It's what we call a cosmopolitan species. It started off the coast of India, and now it's everywhere. And you can get sick from it, all over the globe. But especially up in like Washington State has a big issue with Vibrio.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with their oysters.
Can I carry some sort of testing thing around?
No, unfortunately, but the state usually we all try to measure the oysters, but it's in very different amounts in different animals, so it's kind of hard to know. But they do their best to try.
Is there a bacteria that can fight the Vibrio before it comes in? It's like, do not enter.
Yeah, there's a big set of research on like probiotics. We use things like kombucha, but you can also put probiotics in certain types of bacteria into oyster growing fields, and it can potentially prevent Vibrio from getting
out. Bye, Vibrio.
Yeah. It's not quite as catchy.
Yeah.
Depends who you talk to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it.
Did you know that, though, just about like one bacteria fighting another as a means to reduce pathogens and stuff like that?
Yes.
Clearly. I didn't.
I mean, bacteria, they fight each other, There's good ones and bad ones. They do everything.
Yeah.
It's competition.
So are you studying remediation too? Like how, are you just still trying to like get data on what's happening?
So not personally. So a lot of what I'm doing now is really trying to establish the building blocks of understanding the interaction between plastic and disease. This is kind of like a newer concept. It took us a long time to realize. We were like, oh yeah, plastics are covered in bacteria. When you put them in the ocean, they're covered with all little invertebrates and everything. And, people about 10 years ago started figuring out that a lot of them were pathogenic. And so it started this new kind of sect among microplastic researchers to study the diseases. So we're sort of still trying to understand. What I'm trying to do is establish a link between when there's bacteria growing on a piece of plastic and if that's eaten by an organism, is that transmitted into the body? And so that hasn't really been experimentally validated much yet. So that's what I'm working on. So it's still the building blocks of this concept. But a lot of what I talk about is remediation. And with plastic pollution, the large plastics, so when we're talking about plastic in general that make it into the environment, you have macroplastics, which are like the large pieces like a water bottle. And then you have microplastics, which was anything smaller than like the size of a pencil eraser. And so when you're with macroplastics, they'll often wash up on shorelines, or, you can take, for example, fishing nets are often something that's discarded in the ocean. You can take those out. There's a lot of organizations that have ships going out trying to pluck these nets out of the water and clean it up a little bit. So that's how you can remediate, what's already in the environment. Unfortunately for microplastics, because they're so small, there isn't a way that wouldn't damage the environment to get them out. The key with remediation is really prevention at the immediate scale. So that's what something like Bye Bye Plastic is going to be amazing for, because really the key to solving the plastic crisis is not really cleaning up. It's kind of what we call stopping the tap. So if you have a bathtub that's overflowing, you're not going to try to bucket the water out. You're going to turn the tap off. And that's what we think about with plastic, is that we really have to just stop producing it at the level that we're producing it. The plastic that we have made, we need to find ways to reuse it or recycle it and then use it again. And those are going to be the big kind of silver bullets to managing the plastic crisis.
I have a question for you. So when I was living in Tulum a couple years ago, there was a company that was making a machine that could eat any plastic and it turns it back into the different types of oil that you're talking about. Sorry, the polymers and propylene, all that kind of stuff. And then I saw some different companies trying to build these, but no one never took off. Why? I feel like that's a great solution, because if it would create a good economy in Tulum, like the people that are looking for jobs can go pick up plastic, bring it to the machine that makes the oil and the gas and whatever. But it never took off. I feel like that creates another circular kind of economy of possibilities.
Yeah.
How come?
Yeah.
That's a great solution, no?
Absolutely. And it's something that a lot of people are studying and trying to figure out how to do it. The
But
problem
the
with
machine
plastic
exists.
is that they do, but
it
they're
exists.
very expensive. And we haven't quite nailed the chemistry, I would say. A lot of the issues with plastic recycling, so not exactly what you're talking about, but plastic recycling, is that when we make plastics, it's not just polypropylene, the polymer itself. We add in a lot of chemicals. So things like dyes, plasticizers, things like BPA, if you've heard of that.
What's the name of the thing that makes it flexible?
Like phthalates.
Phthalate.
Yeah. So that's kind of, that's a BPA's version of that. You have UV filters, which is basically a sunscreen for the plastics so that they don't degrade in sunlight super fast. You have flame retardants, so things like we put in couches, we put that in plastics. So there's a lot of these chemicals that you add in. And the problem with these is a lot of them are toxic. So when you end up recycling these plastics, you end up with all of these chemicals. And it's hard to kind of separate them from the plastic, but then it's what do you do with these chemicals at the end of that cycle? And so That's one of the reasons why kind of turning plastic back into plastic is really difficult.
Is there any way to put non-toxic things into these materials to have the same effect of that, so that when you go to make fuel or whatever out of the plastic, that it's tracked and it's trusted that it's only plastic?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that would be amazing, but there's no motivation to do that. That would be really expensive to come up with all of these new chemicals.
Females ran the world.
Yeah. And
Pay attention to
that's
detail.
the dream. Trust me. We all talk about that in our circles all the time. But yeah, there's just not a lot of motivation in the US specifically to make healthy chemicals. Everything here is like very money based, and a lot of the country is very reliant on these chemical companies, and they control a lot. So there hasn't been a lot of motivation to make these like healthier, less, more green chemicals is what a lot of people call them. That's something that, the past administration was trying to invest more in, was a lot of green chemistry initiatives. And that's something that we should put a lot of money into. So that would be great. We're not there yet. But in terms of the machine you're talking about, it would be really cool. I'm just sure that they're really expensive to run. And so a lot of times these things don't take off.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, that machine, it was running and very well. And it was kind of homemade.
Yeah.
But then there was this other guy, in London that was trying to he needed $10 million to build that business,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, what kind of resistance are you usually met with? I mean, it's like obviously the bottom line is kind of what Kara is talking about.
Profit.
Yeah.
The music industry is you need to make profit you need a successful event so you can put on the next one, so everyone's concerned with their bottom line, and it's normal. But at the end of the day, you show them how over 2, 3, 4 events, how they're actually going to be, saving a lot more money. So again, it's a short behavior change. But at the end of the day, some of them are sponsored by plastic, companies. But then we also gravitate towards people that low-hanging fruit, the people that think like us, smaller boutique festivals, people that, and it's about your network and people also that had their eureka moment with plastic.
So
you can't force, that's the thing you can't force. Everyone has their own time with this thing. It's just like, if you have a family member and like, for instance, I'll use my sister as an example. I've been meditating since 2012. And then you get so excited once you had your eureka moment with the whole meditation thing and connecting to yourself, you want to explain it to everyone, because if you're like, if my sister had it, then her life would be so different. But she wasn't ready for it. But now she's like going on all these crazy trips, all the discovery. She's super connected to herself and she's gone deep now.
Well, attraction, not promotion. It's like the most effective way to carry that message. So just so I know, how does a festival save money in the long term by not using single-use plastics?
So basically, they can have, you can come up with a million models, but you can have a water station and you charge extra on the ticket, like $5, $10, and then they have unlimited water. You know what I mean? But if you're charging every single person an extra $5, $10 on the ticket, you know what I mean? That could be potentially more, because maybe not everyone buys water at the festival if they were charging plastic. So there's add-ons to tickets. There's so many different models.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one. Yes, but we can move on to the next one.
Well, is there anything else, any other messages that either of you would like to convey, or anecdotes or questions for one another?
I just had another revelation, is like you were asking about what do DJs do? Or I don't know what the question was, but
what's it like to be?
That is circularity. It's energy circulating, right? I'm giving energy through my music, and I need that feedback in order to take the next steps or pick the next song or to decide which direction to go. But if I'm not, I need to get that feedback, you know what I mean? And because then I also feel more confidence. Because as a DJ up there, if people aren't dancing or they don't have their hands in the air, our ego is deflated, or we start having insecurities, and it's that feedback loop that creates that one vibe. So that's circularity in itself.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally evident. And I think to me that is like just so visible in that relationship more than anywhere else, because people are dancing rather than like just like a club show, not club music, dance music, but like a regular, if a band is playing, you could have a room packed with people with their arms folded, you know? And so like you don't really see that same exchange.
But like, for instance, like, but it depends where you go in the world. Like in America, everyone's their hands up. But if you go to Romania, people don't have their phones out and they're just vibing, you know? So it's a different level.
What about Japan?
Oh, they love to jump. I don't play there often. I think I've played there twice. But they jump up and down, like totally like offbeat. And that's really cool.
Really?
It's so cute.
Yeah.
It's so cute. It's such a different culture.
They're just so, and there's like politeness too is a big part of audience.
It is. It's very, very, very polite, but not on the dance floor. They're just happy-go-lucky.
Mm-hmm. Super cool. Well, I can't thank you both enough for doing this. This is really tremendous. That's it.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
This is tremendous.
So in your world, does 1 + 1 = 2 or 1 + 1 = 11? Trick question.
Ooh, great cue.
I hadn't heard that one.
I don't.
What is your feeling? What is your
That 1 + 1 = 2, I think.
why?
For me, it's just very straightforward. Answering the question.
Okay, so can I open your mind? Can I give you my perspective?
Sure.
Okay, so if everything is energy, right? To me, 1 + 1 = 11. I'll tell you why. Intention is the first one. And what is intention? It's a seed, right? A seed has, if we're talking about banana trees or whatever, that seed has every intention to grow into the most lush banana tree ever, right? And that's the first one. And then if you put attention, which is energy, into that seed, you water it, whatever, that equals manifestation, which to me is magic. Like the fact that a little tiny seed can grow into the biggest, beautiful whatever in nature, that's magic to me. So for that reason, manifestation = 11.
That's cool. I like that.
Well, why 11 and not like a million then?
Infinity.
Yeah.
Because if it rolls well, just like Bye Bye Plastic versus Bye Bye Verbio.
Yeah.
11 is a magic number, right? If we're talking about magic,
yeah,
what number do you put there? I mean, infinity is also magic, but 11 is the more widespread. 11 is a magic number, yeah. And also 1 + 1, just put them together.
Yeah.
It's like hidden in plain sight, just like energy and plastic.
Well, when you said manifestation, I just kind of was going to like, why stop at 11?
Magic number.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for what you guys are doing to get us out of this mess.
But we need you too. We can't do it by ourselves.
Yeah.
We need everyone. Subscribe to this. We don't need everyone. Actually, we just need a tipping point. That doesn't require everyone.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I'll tell you something, and there's something that I saw on your website just about music being, it was phrased really beautifully, but it was something about, we use the power of music, the strongest social connector, to create positive ripple effects. And I had this experience. Part of the reason why I started this project was because I was inspired by the folk singer Pete Seeger, and so Pete was like playing for like labor protests in the 40s and stuff, and he moved upstate New York, and he like saw what a terrible mess the Hudson River was, and he was a total optimist and idealist, and it was like pre-hippie, and he had this idea. He said, this is what we're gonna do. We're going to build a sloop, an old sailing ship like the ones that Henry Hudson sailed up in the 1600s. And we're going to go from town to town, and we're going to sing songs educating people about the river. And that's how we're going to clean it up. And it worked.
Because that was his authentic way of bringing, his vibe to table.
But it worked. Like, people thought he was crazy, and it was
Right, but if you did it or I did it wouldn't be the same. We'd have our own way of doing
we'd
it.
get our own shit, Anyway.
Well, I think that this podcast is great. I think it's such a great way to get people who wouldn't maybe traditionally be listening to scientific concepts to learn,
And they're accessible, accessible to people who might not otherwise think they are. Well, thanks again, gang.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out Viv's new record, Never Walk Alone. You can pick up your bio-vinyl copy and stay up to date with her live appearance schedule by visiting her website, blondish.world. You can read more about Kara's research and that of the Scripps Institute at scripps.ucsd.edu. Sing for Science is co-produced by Talkhouse and made possible in part by a grant from the Simons Foundation. Our music is by Panoram, social media manager is Bailey Constas, digital producer is Keenan Cush, and our location recording was provided by Patrick Espinosa and Neha Pierce. Special thanks to Lauren Wood and the Scripps Oceanographic Institute for making today's episode possible. If you like Sing for Science, the best way you can support us is to give us a review, tell a friend about the show, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. For more information, please visit singforscience.org and follow us on social media at Sing for Science. Thanks for listening.